Blood dripped down the shiny white tiles of the school hallway, leaving a trail that shocked every student who stood frozen in silence. The gentle boy they once mocked, the quiet black student who never raised his voice, was now standing in the middle of the chaos with wild eyes and clenched fists. His white shirt was stained red, his hands trembling but firm, and his breath heavy like a storm. The students around him were too scared to move, too frightened to speak, watching as he glared at them like a wolf ready to tear apart its prey. Some whispered his name in disbelief, others gasped, and a few even cried. No one could believe this was the same boy they had pushed around for months. He looked different, hard, broken, ruthless. He wasn't the gentle kid anymore. He was something else, something dangerous. And then he whispered one chilling sentence that made everyone's heart stop. "You made me this." The hallway was silent except for the distant sound of footsteps approaching. No one knew if he would lash out again, or if he was finally done. No one knew what he was about to do next. But how did it get this far? How did a kind, soft-spoken student turn into a bloodthirsty figure in the middle of his school? It all began months earlier, on his very first day at Jefferson High. Jordan Carter was 15 when he transferred to Jefferson High School in Ohio. He was a tall, slim boy with deep brown skin and curious eyes that carried more kindness than anyone could measure. He had just moved with his mom, Angela, from Atlanta after she got a new job as a nurse. For Jordan, it was supposed to be a fresh start. He wanted nothing more than to make friends, play basketball, and get good grades. But Jefferson High was not welcoming. From the moment he stepped into the school, he noticed the stares. Some were curious, some cold, and some outright hostile. He was one of the very few black students in a mostly white school, and he felt it. The whispers followed him in the hallway, the smirks when he passed by, the way certain kids laughed when he answered questions in class. At first, Jordan tried to brush it off. His mom had taught him to be strong, to ignore ignorance. "Keep your head high, baby," she would say every morning before he left for school. "Don't let anyone tell you who you are." So Jordan stayed gentle. He smiled at everyone, offered help when someone dropped their books, and tried to join conversations even when they went quiet as soon as he spoke. But kindness wasn't enough. The bullying started small. A shove in the hallway. A cruel joke whispered too loudly. Someone calling him boy with a mocking tone. Then it grew worse. His gym shoes were stolen. His locker was painted with the words, "Go back where you came from." In the cafeteria, a group of boys once tossed food at him, laughing as mashed potatoes slid down his shirt. The leader of the group was a boy named Brad Thompson. Brad was the quarterback of the football team, tall and strong with blonde hair and blue eyes. He had power in the school, and he loved to use it. Brad saw Jordan as an easy target, different, quiet, and new. Every cruel prank, every insult, every shove, Brad made sure Jordan was at the center of it. "Look at you," Brad sneered one day in the locker room. "Thinking you belong here. This isn't your school." Jordan clenched his fists but stayed silent. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want trouble. He just wanted peace. But peace was not given to him. There were days Jordan came home and cried into his pillow. He never told his mom the full truth because he didn't want to worry her. He forced a smile at dinner, lied about his day, and said things were fine. But deep down, he was cracking. His heart ached, his spirit dimmed, and the kindness that once defined him was being crushed under the weight of cruelty. Still, Jordan held on. He tried to focus on basketball. He loved the game, loved the feeling of the ball in his hands, the rhythm of the court. Coach Daniels saw potential in him, and even let him practice with the junior varsity team. Basketball became his escape, the only place where he felt like himself again. But Brad didn't stop, not even there. During one practice, Brad tripped Jordan so hard that he slammed into the ground, his knee scraping against the hardwood floor. The other players laughed, except a few who looked away uncomfortably. Coach Daniels blew his whistle, but instead of scolding Brad, he told Jordan to toughen up. That night, Jordan sat in his room staring at his reflection in the mirror. He saw the boy his mom raised. The boy who believed in kindness, in patience, in love. But behind that reflection, he saw the shadows of anger rising, whispering that maybe kindness was no longer enough. Still, he held back. The weeks went on, and the torment continued. Brad and his friends cornered Jordan in the restroom, shoved him into lockers, and mocked his skin color openly. Teachers often ignored it, brushing it off as kids being kids. But to Jordan, it felt like the whole school was against him. And then came the breaking point. It was a Friday afternoon. The halls were buzzing with excitement for the upcoming football game. Jordan was heading to his locker when he saw a crowd gathered. His heart sank. His locker was open, and inside hung a noose made from a piece of rope. Written in bold black marker across the door were the words, "You don't belong here." The crowd laughed, some even taking pictures with their phones. Jordan's hands shook as he stared at the noose. He felt his chest tighten, his breath growing heavy. He turned to see Brad standing in the back, smirking with satisfaction. Something inside Jordan snapped that day. He ripped the noose out of his locker, his eyes burning with tears and rage. He wanted to scream, to hit, to destroy. But instead, he stormed out of the school and ran home. That night, he couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every shove, every insult, every cruel laugh. He remembered his mom's words, "Keep your head high," but they no longer felt enough. He felt like he was drowning, cornered with no way out. The next morning, Jordan woke up with a cold stillness in his chest. He looked at himself in the mirror again, but this time, he didn't see the gentle boy anymore. He saw someone different, someone harder, someone who refused to be broken again. From that day on, Jordan changed. He stopped smiling. He stopped trying to fit in. He started carrying himself with a quiet, frightening edge that made even teachers pause when they looked at him. He studied people differently, watching their moves, memorizing their patterns. He was no longer just enduring, he was preparing. The first sign of his transformation came 2 weeks later. Brad and his friends cornered him in the parking lot after school. They laughed, ready to humiliate him again. But this time, Jordan didn't shrink back. He stood tall, his eyes cold and unblinking. "Move," Jordan said in a voice that carried no fear. Brad laughed and shoved him. But before anyone could blink, Jordan's fist connected with Brad's jaw, sending him stumbling back in shock. The parking lot went silent. No one had ever seen Jordan fight back. No one had ever seen that look in his eyes. Brad lunged again, but Jordan was faster. Years of bottled-up rage exploded in a storm of punches, each one landing harder than the last. Blood spilled, shouts erupted, and by the time teachers ran out to stop it, Brad was lying on the ground, his face bruised and bleeding, while Jordan stood above him, breathing heavily. The students who watched would never forget the sight. That was the day Jordan Carter stopped being the gentle black student. That was the day he started becoming something else. And it was only the beginning. Because that night, as Jordan sat in his room staring at his blood-stained knuckles, he felt something he had never felt before. Power. And once you taste power after a lifetime of pain, you don't let it go. The next Monday, whispers filled the halls. Some students avoided Jordan, others looked at him with awe. But Brad? He wasn't done. He wanted revenge. And Jordan? He was ready. The stage was set for something darker, something no one in Jefferson High would ever forget. And it all exploded on the night of the homecoming dance. Jordan walked into the gym that night with a calm expression, but inside, he was carrying a storm. Brad and his friends had been plotting, and Jordan knew it. He had heard the whispers, seen the looks. They wanted to humiliate him in front of everyone. But Jordan wasn't the same boy anymore. As the music played and students danced, Jordan waited. He waited until Brad made his move, stepping forward with that same cruel smirk, holding a cup filled with something foul he planned to throw on Jordan. The crowd was watching. The trap was set. But this time, Jordan wasn't the victim. He struck first. and the entire gym erupted in screams. The cup never touched him. Jordan's hand shot out so fast that Brad didn't even see it coming. He gripped Brad's wrist like iron and twisted hard, forcing the cup to fall and splash uselessly onto the floor. The liquid sprayed across the gym floor, missing Jordan completely. The crowd gasped, a sea of shocked faces turning toward them. Brad tried to pull back, but Jordan didn't let go. He leaned in close, his voice low and sharp like a blade. "Not this time." Then, with a force that made everyone scream, Jordan shoved Brad backwards so hard that he slammed into the refreshment table, sending plates, cups, and food flying everywhere. The music cut off. The lights seemed brighter. The gym was filled with chaos. Brad stumbled to his feet, furious. "You think you can touch me? You're dead, Carter." He lunged forward, fists raised. But Jordan was ready. Months of pain, humiliation, and rage exploded through his body. He moved with a speed no one expected. His fist connected with Brad's face once, twice, 3 times. Each punch was like thunder, echoing through the gym. Blood sprayed, screams rose, and the crowd pushed back in fear. For the first time, Brad wasn't the predator, he was the prey. Jordan's eyes burned, his fists relentless. The gentle boy was gone. In his place stood someone fierce, unstoppable, and bloodthirsty. Students whispered in terror as Brad's powerful frame crumbled under Jordan's fury. "Stop it! Someone stop him!" a girl cried, but no one dared move closer. Teachers rushed in, trying to pull Jordan away, but even they struggled. His rage was too strong, his body too powerful in that moment. When they finally dragged him back, Brad lay on the ground, beaten and bloodied, his nose crooked, his lip torn, his pride shattered. The gym was silent, everyone frozen in shock. Jordan stood in the middle, chest heaving, fists dripping blood, his eyes scanning the crowd with a glare that made even the boldest students step back. And then he said the same words that would haunt the school forever. "You made me this." The crowd trembled. It was the most terrifying moment Jefferson High had ever seen. The police were called. An ambulance came for Brad. The dance was over before it had even begun. Jordan was taken out of the gym in handcuffs, his mother rushing to the school in tears. Angela Carter had always believed her son was gentle, patient, and kind. When she saw him being pushed into the back of a police car, covered in blood, her heart shattered. "Jordan, what happened?" she cried, running toward him. But Jordan just shook his head, his eyes still cold. "They wouldn't stop, Mom." The police drove him to the station. He sat in the holding cell, silent, staring at the wall. Other kids his age would have been trembling, begging, crying. But not Jordan. His silence was heavy, dangerous. Later that night, Angela was allowed to take him home, but with warnings. "One more violent incident and he's out of school for good," the officer said. "This boy is on a dangerous path." Angela hugged her son tightly in their small apartment, tears soaking her cheeks. "Jordan, this isn't you. Please, don't let them turn you into something you're not." But Jordan just sat still, staring at his hands. The blood was gone, but he could still feel it. The following week, the school was buzzing with rumors. Some students saw Jordan as a monster. Others whispered with awe, almost in admiration. No one dared bully him anymore. The hallway that once echoed with cruel laughter now fell silent whenever he walked by. But peace didn't follow. Fear did. Teachers avoided looking him in the eye. Students moved aside as he passed. Even his basketball coach benched him, until things settled down. Jordan became a shadow, drifting through the school with a quiet intensity. He no longer smiled, no longer spoke unless he had to. But deep inside, something darker was growing. That night at the dance had unlocked a side of him he never knew existed, and it terrified even him. At home, Angela tried everything to reach him. She cooked his favorite meals, prayed with him, even begged him to open up. But Jordan stayed distant. He spent hours staring out the window, his mind replaying every cruel word, every shove, every humiliation. He thought about Brad lying in that hospital bed. He thought about how no one had protected him until he protected himself. And he thought about how good it felt to finally fight back. But Brad wasn't done. 2 weeks after the dance, Brad returned to school with a swollen face and bruises that hadn't fully healed. His pride was shattered, but his hatred was alive. His friends circled him, promising revenge. "You gonna let him get away with it?" one of them asked. Brad clenched his jaw. "Nobody makes me look weak. Nobody. He's gonna pay." That night, Brad and his friends made a plan. Jordan walked home alone most evenings. His mother's shifts at the hospital were long, and he usually cut through an alley to reach their apartment quicker. On a cold Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jordan felt it, the prickling sensation that he wasn't alone. He turned the corner, and there they were. Brad and 3 of his friends, waiting in the shadows. "Well, well," Brad sneered. "Look who thinks he's tough now." Jordan's heart pounded, but he didn't flinch. He stood tall, his eyes steady. "What do you want, Brad?" Brad's smile was cruel. "I want you broken. I want you crawling. You think you're scary? Tonight, we show everyone who really runs this school." They circled him like wolves. Jordan's fists clenched. He didn't want to fight, but he knew he had no choice. The first punch came fast. One of Brad's friends swung at him, but Jordan dodged and countered, his fist connecting with the boy's stomach. The boy doubled over, gasping for air. Another rushed him from behind, but Jordan turned, elbowing him in the jaw. The sound of bone meeting bone echoed in the alley. Brad charged next, slamming Jordan against the wall. Pain shot through his back, but Jordan didn't let it stop him. He headbutted Brad, sending him stumbling backward. The alley erupted in violence. Fists flew, shouts echoed, and the clash of rage filled the night. Jordan fought like someone possessed, every punch powered by months of buried pain. He was faster, sharper, deadlier. One by one, Brad's friends fell to the ground, groaning in pain. And then it was just Brad. Breathing hard, his face twisted in fury, Brad swung wildly. Jordan ducked, blocked, and countered with a blow so fierce that Brad crashed to the ground, blood spilling from his nose once again. Jordan stood over him, chest heaving, fists trembling. His eyes burned with something darker than anger. Something cold. Something bloodthirsty. The alley was silent except for the groans of Brad's beaten friends. Jordan leaned down, his voice a whisper that chilled Brad to the bone. "I told you, don't push me." Then he raised his fist again. Brad's eyes widened in terror. "Wait, no, please." But Jordan's hand didn't stop. His fist came down with brutal force, again and again, each strike more ruthless than the last. The walls of the alley echoed with the sound of fists smashing bone, the sound of rage exploding without mercy. When he finally stopped, Brad lay motionless, his face swollen and bloody, his body barely moving. Jordan stood over him, covered in sweat, his knuckles raw and bleeding. He looked at the carnage he had created, the 3 boys groaning on the ground, Brad lying broken, and for a moment, he felt nothing. No guilt, no regret, only a chilling calm. He whispered again, his voice cold and sharp. "You made me this." The alley fell silent, and in that silence, Jordan realized something terrifying. He had crossed a line he could never come back from. The alley smelled of blood and sweat. Jordan stood there, his fists dripping red, his chest rising and falling like a wild beast that had finally torn free from its chains. Brad lay still, his swollen face almost unrecognizable. His friends moaned weakly on the ground, too broken to move. The moonlight fell over the scene, casting long shadows that made everything feel even more haunting. Jordan stared at his hands. His knuckles were raw, his skin split open in places, blood mixing with sweat. He should have felt horror, guilt, or fear. But instead, he felt a terrifying calm. For the first time since stepping foot in Jefferson High, no one was laughing at him. No one was mocking him. No one was calling him names. They were silent. defeated, afraid. "You made me this," he whispered again, his voice so low that only Brad could hear it, if he was even conscious. For a long moment Jordan stood still, his eyes locked on the broken quarterback at his feet. Then, slowly, he turned and walked away. The alley seemed to echo with each step, his shadow stretching like a predator retreating back into the darkness. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just walked home. Angela Carter noticed the blood the second Jordan stepped into their apartment. She was sitting at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs after a long shift at the hospital. "Jordan!" she gasped, rushing to him. "What happened? Oh my God, your hands!" He pulled back when she tried to touch him. His voice was flat. "Don't worry about it, Mom. I'm fine." "Fine? Look at you." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Baby, what did you do?" Jordan stared at her, his face unreadable. "I did what I had to." Angela's heart broke at those words. She had raised him to be kind, patient, and strong. But the boy standing in front of her didn't look like the gentle son she knew. He looked like someone else. Someone hardened by the world. Someone who had been pushed too far. "Jordan," she whispered, gripping his arms, please tell me you didn't go too far." He pulled away, heading toward his room. "They won't bother me again." Angela stood in the doorway as he shut himself inside, tears streaming down her face. She knew something had snapped inside her son, and she didn't know how to fix it. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Students whispered in the hallways. Some swore Jordan had almost killed Brad. Others claimed they saw him walk away like a monster who felt nothing. By lunchtime, half the school was convinced Jordan was dangerous, a ticking time bomb. But there was another group too. Students who had been bullied, kids who had always stayed silent out of fear. They looked at Jordan differently now. Not with fear, but with respect. For them, Jordan was a symbol, proof that someone could finally stand up to Brad and his crew. "He's not a monster," one girl whispered to her friend. "He's a hero. He did what nobody else could." But the teachers didn't see it that way. Principal Harris called Jordan into his office. The stern-faced man sat behind his desk, his hands folded tightly. "Jordan," he began, his voice heavy with disappointment, "what happened last night is unacceptable. Brad is in the hospital with a broken nose, fractured ribs, and a concussion. His parents are furious. Do you understand the seriousness of this?" Jordan sat silently, staring at the floor. "This is the second violent incident involving you in less than a month," Harris continued. "You're suspended for 2 weeks. And if anything like this happens again, you will be expelled permanently." Jordan finally looked up, his eyes steady and cold. "So you're suspending me for defending myself?" The principal stiffened. "You didn't just defend yourself, Jordan. You went too far. Violence is never the answer." Jordan leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Then why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you protect me when they bullied me every single day? When they painted my locker, when they shoved me, when they called me names? Where were you then?" Harris opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jordan stood, his presence filling the office with a strange, intimidating energy. "You did nothing. So I did something. And I won't apologize for it." With that, he walked out, leaving the principal speechless. The suspension gave Jordan too much time to think. He spent his days locked in his room, replaying the fights in his mind. Each punch, each scream, each drop of blood, it all came back to him like flashes of lightning. And every time, instead of guilt, he felt that same chilling calm. That same sense of power. At night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, his heart pounding with restless energy. He couldn't stop thinking about the look on Brad's face when he begged. The fear in his eyes. The helplessness. For once, Jordan hadn't been the one cornered. He had been the one in control. And he liked it. But deep down, a part of him still fought against the darkness. He thought about his mother's tears, her trembling hands as she begged him not to lose himself. He thought about the boy he used to be, the gentle, kind Jordan who believed in patience. He wondered if that boy was gone forever. When Jordan returned to school after 2 weeks, everything felt different. The halls were quieter when he passed. Students avoided eye contact. Even teachers seemed tense around him. But something else had changed too. For the first time, Brad wasn't there. He was still recovering, and without him, the entire school dynamic shifted. The fear that Brad once commanded now seemed to hover around Jordan. He hadn't asked for it, but it was there, following him like a shadow. One afternoon, as he sat in the cafeteria alone, a boy named Marcus slid into the seat across from him. Marcus was small, with glasses and a nervous smile. "Hey," Marcus said quietly. "I just wanted to say, thank you for standing up to Brad. He's been making my life hell for years. You're the only one who ever fought back." Jordan studied him, unsure what to say. "You're not alone, you know," Marcus added. "There are a lot of us who feel the same way. We never had the courage you did." Jordan frowned. "I wasn't trying to be a hero." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe not. But you are to some of us." For the first time in weeks, Jordan felt something other than rage. He felt a strange mix of pride and confusion. Could it be that his violence, his descent into ruthlessness, was inspiring others? But Brad wasn't finished. Even in recovery, he plotted. From his hospital bed, he sent messages through his friends, spreading lies about Jordan. He told anyone who would listen that Jordan was dangerous, unstable, a monster. Some students believed him. Others didn't. But the division grew. By the time Brad returned to school, walking with a slight limp, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Everyone knew something was going to happen. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And it didn't take long. It was a cold Wednesday afternoon when it finally happened. The last bell had just rung, and students poured into the parking lot. Jordan was heading toward his mother's car when he heard it. "Hey, Carter!" He turned. Brad was there, his face still bruised but his eyes burning with hatred. A crowd gathered instantly, sensing what was about to unfold. Brad stepped forward, pointing a finger at Jordan. "You think you're tough? You think you scared me? You didn't win. You just started something you can't finish." Jordan's jaw tightened. He said nothing, just stared. Brad sneered. "You're nothing but a thug. A mistake. You don't belong here, and I'm gonna make sure everyone knows it." The crowd gasped, waiting for Jordan's response. And for a moment, it seemed like he might walk away. He turned slightly, his mother's car just a few steps away. He could end it there. He could leave. But then Brad spit on the ground at his feet. "Coward." Something inside Jordan snapped again. He turned back slowly, his eyes dark, his fists clenched. The crowd hushed, the air heavy with anticipation. And then Jordan charged. The parking lot erupted into chaos the moment Jordan lunged forward. His shoes slammed against the pavement as he closed the distance between himself and Brad, who had just enough time to brace himself before Jordan's shoulder crashed into his chest like a battering ram. The impact sent Brad stumbling back against a parked car, the metal door denting with a sickening crunch. Students screamed, their voices mixing with the squeal of car alarms. Phones shot into the air as dozens of hands recorded the moment. Everyone had been waiting for this. Another clash between Jefferson High's fallen quarterback and the gentle black student who had become something terrifying. Brad swung wildly, his fist glancing off Jordan's cheek. The hit barely fazed him. Jordan's eyes blazed with fury, and before Brad could swing again, Jordan's knuckles slammed into his stomach. The force doubled Brad over, spit flying from his mouth. "You don't get it, do you?" Jordan growled through gritted teeth. He grabbed Brad by the collar and dragged him across the hood of the car. "You can't break me anymore." Brad coughed, trying to fight back, but Jordan's fists came down in a brutal storm. 1, 2, 3, each punch cracking against Brad's face until his nose burst again, blood spraying onto the car's shiny paint. The crowd gasped in horror and awe, their cheers fading into silence as they realized Jordan wasn't stopping. "Jordan, stop!" someone shouted, but he didn't hear them. He was too far gone. The rage had swallowed him whole. Brad's head slammed back against the car window, and the glass shattered into 1,000 sharp pieces. Blood streaked his blonde hair, his eyes swollen shut. He whimpered, his voice broken. "Please, stop." For a brief moment Jordan froze. His chest heaved, his fists hovered above Brad's battered face. Around him, the crowd held its breath. And then Jordan spoke, his voice low, steady, and filled with cold fire. "You made me this." He raised his fist again. And that's when police sirens wailed in the distance. The crowd scattered instantly, students dropping their phones and backpacks as they ran in every direction. Brad's friends grabbed him, pulling him away from Jordan as best they could, though his body sagged heavily between them. 2 police cruisers screeched into the lot, their lights flashing red and blue across the scene. Officers jumped out, guns drawn. "Step back. Hands where we can see them," one shouted. Jordan froze, his chest still heaving, his fists trembling. His mind spun. For a second, he considered running. But then he remembered the last time, the cuffs, the cell, his mother's tears. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands in the air. The officers rushed forward, grabbing him roughly and slamming him face first onto the hood of a car. The cold metal bit into his skin as they cuffed him. "You're under arrest for assault," one officer barked. Jordan said nothing. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his mind blank. Angela was at the police station within an hour, her face pale, her hands trembling. She had been called out of work again, and this time the officer's words were harsher. "Your son isn't just in trouble, Mrs. Carter," one said. "He's a danger. He nearly put another student in the hospital, for the second time." Angela clutched her purse tightly, her voice breaking. "He's not a danger. He's my son. He's been through too much." But the officer shook his head. "The school board is meeting tomorrow. Expulsion is almost certain. And if Brad's parents press charges, he could be facing juvenile detention." Angela's knees went weak. She sat down heavily, tears streaming down her face. Jordan sat across from her in the holding room, his eyes steady but tired. He didn't look like the boy she once knew. He looked older, harder, like someone carrying the weight of every fight on his shoulders. "Jordan," she whispered, her voice cracking, "why are you doing this? Why are you letting them turn you into something you're not?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because if I don't fight, Mom, I'll be crushed. You don't know what it's like in there. They don't stop. They never stop." Angela sobbed quietly, her head in her hands. "Baby, please, don't lose yourself." For the first time that night, Jordan's eyes softened. He reached across the table, his cuffed hands clinking. "I don't want to lose myself, Mom. But they already took everything from me." The next day, the school board meeting was packed. Parents, students, teachers, all gathered in the auditorium to hear what would happen. Brad's parents stood at the front, furious, demanding justice. "Our son is the victim," Mr. Thompson thundered. "This boy is violent, unstable, and dangerous. He doesn't belong in Jefferson High, or any school for that matter." Angela stood too, her voice trembling but strong. "My son is not a monster. He was bullied, humiliated, targeted every single day. The school failed to protect him, and now you want to punish him for defending himself." The room erupted into murmurs. Some nodded in agreement. Others shook their heads. Finally, the board made their decision. Jordan was expelled. Angela broke down in tears. Jordan sat still, his face expressionless, but inside something shifted. Expelled. Cast out. Branded as dangerous. They had taken away his last chance at normal. The following weeks were dark. Jordan stayed home, restless and quiet. Angela tried to homeschool him, but he barely paid attention. He spent most of his time staring out the window, his thoughts heavy. At night, he would wander the streets, his hoodie pulled over his head, his fists stuffed into his pockets. He felt the eyes of the world on him, the whispers, the rumors, the fear. One night, he found himself back at the alley. The place where everything changed. He stood there, staring at the stains on the pavement, the ghosts of his rage haunting him. And then he heard footsteps. He turned. A group of students stood there, 5 of them, led by Marcus, the same boy who had thanked him in the cafeteria weeks ago. "Jordan," Marcus said, his voice low. "We've been looking for you." Jordan frowned. "Why?" Marcus stepped closer. "Because we need you. People like us, the ones who've been bullied, humiliated, crushed, we're tired of it. You showed us it doesn't have to be this way. You showed us we can fight back." The others nodded, their faces filled with a strange mix of fear and admiration. "You're not alone anymore," Marcus continued. "You're our leader now." Jordan stared at them, his heart pounding. For so long he had been alone, fighting battles no one else understood. And now, here they were, others who had suffered like him, ready to follow. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just one boy anymore. He was the start of something bigger. Something dangerous. He looked at Marcus, then at the others. Slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said quietly. "But if we're gonna do this, we do it my way." From that night on, Jordan wasn't just a boy. He was the leader of something new, a shadow within the school, a group born from pain and fueled by rage. And together, they would make Jefferson High remember. But their first strike would be darker, bloodier, and more shocking than anyone could imagine. Because Jordan had a plan. And it began with Brad Thompson. The night air was heavy as Jordan walked home, Marcus and the others trailing behind him like shadows. Their footsteps echoed softly on the cracked pavement, each one a reminder that something irreversible had just begun. Angela was waiting at the kitchen table when Jordan slipped inside. She didn't notice the figures outside watching him from the darkened street. Her face was lined with exhaustion, her hair pulled into a messy bun. A half-empty mug of coffee sat in front of her, untouched. "You're out late again," she said softly, not looking up from her folded hands. Jordan hesitated, then shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." Angela finally raised her eyes, and what he saw in them made him pause. There was fear there, not just for him, but of him. "You're changing, Jordan," she whispered. "And I don't know if I can reach you anymore." He wanted to say something, to tell her that he was fine, that he was still her son. But the words wouldn't come. He just turned away, heading for his room. Angela's voice stopped him. Promise me you won't let them turn you into a monster." Jordan froze in the doorway, his jaw tightening. "I promise," he said. But in his heart, he knew it was a lie. The next day, Marcus called a meeting. They gathered in the abandoned boiler room beneath the school, a place no one went anymore, its walls streaked with rust and graffiti. The dim light from a single bulb cast their faces in shadows. Marcus, tall and wiry, leaned against the wall. Beside him stood 3 others. Kian, whose stutter made him the target of cruel jokes. Darius, small but quick, always pushed around in the halls. And Tasha, the only girl, who had been mocked endlessly for her weight. They all looked at Jordan with the same mixture of awe and desperation. "You're the reason we're here," Marcus said. "You fought back. You showed them that people like us don't have to take it anymore." Jordan sat on an old chair, his hood pulled low over his face. He said nothing, just let Marcus talk. "We've all been broken by this school. By people like Brad. By the system that protects them. But if we stand together, we can make them pay." The others nodded, their eyes locked on Jordan. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, steady, and dangerous. "If we're gonna do this, we can't just lash out. Chaos won't change anything. We need a plan. A message. Something they'll never forget." "What kind of message?" Tasha asked. Jordan leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "We start with Brad." Brad had been recovering at home, his face swollen and bruised. His parents hovered over him constantly, treating him like a victim. But behind his blackened eyes and stitched lip, Brad seethed with humiliation. He had been the king of Jefferson High. Now he was the boy who got beaten bloody by Jordan Carter, the kid everyone once called weak. Late one evening, as Brad lay in bed scrolling through his phone, he noticed something strange. A text message from an unknown number. It read, "We remember. Do you?" Attached was a photo. His locker, spray-painted with a single word in dripping red, "Payback." Brad sat up, his heart racing. He rushed downstairs to show his parents, but by the time they looked, the message had vanished from his phone. Deleted remotely. He tried to tell himself it was a prank, but deep down, he knew. Jordan wasn't finished. The group's first strike came 2 nights later. Brad's car, a sleek, hand-me-down Camaro from his father, sat parked in the driveway. At 3 in the morning, Jordan and his crew moved silently through the neighborhood, their faces hidden beneath masks. Marcus poured gasoline over the hood, his hands trembling with excitement. Tasha struck the match. The car went up in flames, a pillar of fire lighting the night sky. Brad and his parents burst out of the house, screaming. Neighbors rushed to their windows. But by the time anyone saw the figures disappearing into the shadows, it was too late. The message had been sent. The next day, whispers rippled through the school. Some were horrified. Others secretly cheered. Brad had ruled the school with cruelty. Now, someone was finally making him pay. And at the center of it all was Jordan, silent and watchful, his reputation morphing into something new. He wasn't just feared anymore. He was legendary. But legends draw attention. Detective Harris, a grizzled veteran with tired eyes, was called in to investigate. He stood at the charred remains of the Camaro, hands in his coat pockets. "This isn't random vandalism," he muttered. "This is personal." He glanced at Brad, who stood pale and shaken beside his father. "Do you know who might have done this?" Brad hesitated, then swallowed hard. "It was him. Jordan Carter. He wants me dead." Harris wrote the name down slowly. He'd heard of Jordan. The fights. The expulsion. The boy who snapped. "Then we better keep an eye on him," Harris said. Meanwhile, Jordan's group was growing bolder. They weren't just targeting Brad anymore. They vandalized the gym where bullies hung out, smashing windows and spray-painting walls. They ambushed a senior who had tormented Kian, leaving him bloodied in the locker room. Each act was darker, more violent, and always signed with the same word: payback. Whispers spread like wildfire. Teachers were afraid. Students walked in nervous silence, glancing over their shoulders. And through it all, Jordan grew colder, sharper, his leadership unquestioned. But Angela noticed the change. She saw the bruises on his knuckles, the late nights, the way he avoided her gaze. One night, she confronted him. "Jordan," she said softly, standing in his doorway, "whatever you're doing, please stop before it's too late." He didn't look at her. He just sat on his bed, staring at the wall. "Too late already," he murmured. Angela's heart broke. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Brad returned to school, his face healed enough that he could walk the halls again. But he wasn't the same. His swagger was gone. His laughter had dried up. He was just a shell of the boy who once ruled the school. Jordan watched him from across the cafeteria, his crew at his side. The sight of Brad shrinking, folding into himself, filled him with a dangerous satisfaction. But Marcus leaned in, whispering, "We can't stop now. He deserves worse." "They all do." Jordan hesitated. A part of him longed to stop, to breathe, to let it go. But the fire inside him refused. "No," he said finally. "This is just the beginning." That night they made their boldest move yet. Brad was walking home alone from a party, the street lights flickering overhead. His breath clouded in the cold air, his steps quick. From the shadows, Jordan and his crew emerged. "Evening, Brad," Jordan said, his voice calm, almost mocking. Brad froze. His eyes darted around, searching for escape. But there was none. You thought it was over? Jordan continued, stepping closer. You thought breaking me was the end? No. This is the end. Brad stumbled back, shaking his head. Please. I'm sorry. Jordan's fist cut him off, slamming into his jaw. Brad crumpled to the ground. The crew closed in, their shadows swallowing him. Kicks, fists, blows rained down. Brad screamed, begged, but the sound was drowned by their rage. And then Jordan pulled something from his pocket. A knife. Its blade gleamed under the streetlight. The others froze, eyes wide. Jordan, Marcus whispered. What are you doing? Jordan's hand trembled as he held the knife above Brad's chest. His breathing was ragged, his eyes blazing. This is what they made me, he growled. And just as he prepared to plunge the blade down, headlights flooded the street. A car screeched to a stop. Detective Harris stepped out, gun drawn. Drop it, he roared. Jordan stood frozen, the knife inches from Brad's chest, the weight of every choice pressing down on him. His crew backed away, panic flashing in their eyes. And for the first time, Jordan realized he was standing at the edge of a cliff. One more step, and there would be no coming back. But his grip on the knife only tightened. Drop it! Detective Harris shouted again, his voice echoing down the empty street. The red-blue flash of his cruiser lights bathed everything in violent color. Brad bleeding on the pavement, Jordan trembling with the knife in his hand, and the terrified faces of Marcus, Kian, Darius, and Tasha. Jordan's chest heaved, his breath coming in ragged bursts. His fingers tightened on the knife's handle, the blade reflecting the siren lights like a signal of doom. For a moment, he didn't hear Harris. He didn't hear the world. He only heard the pounding of his own heart and the memory of Brad's laughter in the hallways, the racist slurs, the punches, the humiliation. Brad lay beneath him, face swollen, blood trickling from his nose. He whimpered, "Please, don't." His voice was thin, broken, so different from the arrogant tone he once used to spit venom at Jordan. This was it. The moment Jordan had always thought about in the dark corners of his mind. The power to end Brad's reign, to make him pay fully and forever. His mind screamed, do it. He deserves it. But then, another voice broke through. Softer. Familiar. Jordan, please. Jordan's head snapped up. Angela stood behind Detective Harris, tears streaming down her face. She must have run from the house when she saw the cruiser lights flashing near their block. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of her coat. "That's not you, baby," she pleaded. "That's not my son." The knife shook in Jordan's hand. His jaw clenched. His crew looked at him, waiting, terrified of what he would choose. Detective Harris stepped closer, his gun steady. "Last warning, kid. Drop it, or I'll drop you." The world held its breath. Then Jordan's fingers opened. The knife clattered to the pavement. The sound echoed like thunder in his ears. Brad gasped with relief, scrambling away as Harris rushed forward. He shoved Brad aside and grabbed Jordan, twisting his arms behind his back. The cold bite of handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Marcus and the others scattered like frightened birds, sprinting into the shadows before backup arrived. Tasha looked back once, her eyes wide with guilt, but then she disappeared too. Angela cried out as she watched Harris shove Jordan against the hood of the cruiser. "Please. He's just a boy." "He almost killed someone," Harris barked. "This isn't just a fight. This is attempted murder." Jordan didn't resist. He didn't fight. He just stared at the ground, the adrenaline draining out of him like poison leaving his veins. As the sirens wailed and another squad car pulled up, the neighbors peeked out from their windows. They saw the gentle black student who once walked quietly through the halls now shoved into the back of a police car, looking like a criminal. And maybe, Jordan thought bitterly, that's exactly what he had become. The police station was cold and gray. Jordan sat in the interrogation room, his wrists raw from the cuff. A single camera blinked red in the corner. Detective Harris walked in, tossing a folder onto the table. He didn't sit right away. He just stood, studying Jordan with those tired, disappointed eyes. You had a choice, Harris said finally. I gave you every chance to step back. And still, you had that knife in your hand. Jordan stared at the table. I didn't use it. You almost did, Harris snapped. And that's enough. He slid the folder forward. Inside were photos. Brad's swollen face, the burnt Camaro, graffiti scrawled across lockers and walls. At the bottom were school reports detailing every fight, every complaint, every suspension. It all points to you, kid. Even if your friends were involved, you're the ringleader. Harris leaned forward, his voice low. Why? Why throw your life away? Jordan's jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked Harris in the eye. Because no one listened when it was happening to me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Harris straightened, silent. For a flicker of a second, there was something in his eyes that looked almost like regret. But it vanished quickly, replaced by steel. That may be true, Harris said quietly. But it doesn't excuse what you've become. He left Jordan alone in the room, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like chains. The trial was quick. Brad testified, his voice trembling as he described how Jordan attacked him. His parents painted him as a victim, leaving out the years of cruelty that had led up to that night. Angela sat in the courtroom, hands clasped in prayer, tears streaking her cheeks. She wanted to scream the truth, that her son wasn't a monster, that he had been pushed to the edge by hatred and racism. But her voice felt small against the tide of evidence and fear. Jordan didn't fight the charges. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he simply replied, "No." The gavel fell. He was sentenced to juvenile detention until his 18th birthday, with the possibility of further charges if any new evidence tied him to the other crimes. Brad smirked as Jordan was led away in shackles. For him, it felt like victory. But in Jordan's eyes there was no defeat, only a cold fire that promised the story wasn't over. Juvenile detention was a world of its own. The walls were thick, the guards watchful, the other kids hardened by violence. At first, Jordan kept to himself. He sat in the corner during meals, ignored the taunts, endured the stares. But word of what he'd done traveled fast. The boy who burned cars, who beat bullies, who nearly carved up Brad. The name Jordan Carter became legend in the block. Others began to approach him. Boys who had been beaten, humiliated, cast aside. They looked at him the way Marcus once had, with respect, with hunger for someone to lead them. And slowly, Jordan realized something terrifying. Even locked away, he was becoming exactly what the world feared. A leader. A symbol. A monster. Back home, Angela lit a candle every night in the window. A symbol of hope. A prayer that her son might find his way back. Sometimes, she sat at the table and wrote him letters she never mailed. Dear Jordan, I know you feel like the world has turned its back on you. But please remember, you are more than what they made you. You are still my son. And I am waiting for the day you come home. But the world outside didn't wait. At Jefferson High, the legend of Jordan Carter only grew. Students whispered about the boy who stood up, who fought back, who made the untouchable fall. Some told the story with fear. Others with admiration. And somewhere in the shadows, Marcus, Kian, Darius, and Tasha were still out there, still angry, still waiting for the day their leader returned. Months passed. One evening, Jordan sat in the detention yard, staring at the setting sun behind the barbed wire. He thought of Angela, of the promises he broke, of the knife he almost used. He thought of the gentle boy he once was, and wondered if he would ever find him again. A guard called his name. Carter. You got a visitor. Jordan rose slowly, walking back inside. When he entered the visitation room, his breath caught. It wasn't his mother. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Marcus. He sat at the table, older somehow, harder. His eyes gleamed with something Jordan recognized instantly. Fire. They think locking you up ends the story, Marcus said, leaning forward. But it doesn't. We've been waiting. planning. You're still our leader. And when you get out. He paused, a chilling smile curling across his lip. We'll finish what we started. Jordan's heart pounded. He wanted to say no, to tell Marcus he was done with the violence. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, in the coldest part of his soul, he wasn't sure if he wanted to stop. The guard banged on the door. Time's up. Marcus stood, sliding his hands into his pockets. See you soon, Jordan. The school won't know what hit them. He walked out, leaving Jordan alone at the table, his pulse racing, his future hanging in the balance. Was he doomed to the path of blood forever? Or could he still break free? The question lingered, sharp and unanswered, as Jordan was led back to his cell. And somewhere, far beyond the prison walls, the story of the gentle black student who became ruthless was still being written. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because every new video we share brings the truth to light. Don't stop here, keep watching and stand with us against racism. Thank you for watching to the end.